Ready? All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Still have people trickling in. Welcome, and for those of you that are guests, I'm Matt Knox, and I'm head of the Department of Architecture. Starting in 2004, the Victor Regnier Distinguished Visiting Professorship has brought international architects to K-State such as Hiroshi Hara of Japan, Alberto Campobiesa from Spain, Alan Dunlop from Scotland, and last year, Javier Sanchez from Mexico, to broaden our student experience by exposing them to architects of international renown. The Regnier visiting professor co-teaches a fifth-year studio with one of our faculty and makes 3 to 4 visits to campus during the year. It is the Regnier's family's generosity that has become a part of the secret sauce that makes our program so good and thrive, as well as taste delicious. Continuing this rich tradition, I would like to welcome Stephen Ehrlich, FAIA and RIBA, to Kansas State University as this year's Regnier Distinguished Visiting Professor. Stephen is founding partner of the Culver City, California-based Ehrlich Architects, an internationally recognized design firm which extends the traditions of modernism through multicultural modernism, a distinctive approach that I look forward to learning more about today. A graduate of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, Eric spent 6 years in the 1970s living and working in Africa, serving for 2 years with the Peace Corps, their first architect in Marrakesh, Morocco. His experience of indigenous building architecture without architects is a continuing influence to the firm's work. He is a recipient of the AIA California's prestigious Maybeck Award for outstanding lifelong achievement in architecture and design, and Ehrlich Architects has won 8 national AIA design awards. Stephen is also committed to the education of architects, serving as the inaugural John Jared Visiting Chair at the University of Southern California, where he continues as a visiting professor. He's also taught at UCLA, SciArc, and has been a guest critic at Harvard, Arizona State, and Yale, and has lectured widely at universities and symposiums worldwide. When I was looking at the work of Ehrlich Architects, work that spans a broad spectrum of scales, including renovations and additions, and I was very happy to find the renovation of a Schindler house and an addition to a Neutra house, I was drawn to something that the Italian architect Vittorio Gregati said about precision. Precision means the ability to describe nuances with exactitude, an ability to see through things with subtlety, to know and weigh the value of a detail, to understand the significance of absences, of pauses, of emptiness, of variation, of relationships between architectural objects as well as their individual forms. I can't think of a more fitting prologue to the work of our distinguished Regnier visiting professor. Please welcome Stephen Ehrlich.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited that this is just the first trip on a journey of getting to know at least 14 students very well, and some of you hopefully as well. And thank you for the warm welcome, and nice to see my former colleague and friend Peter Magyar. We actually co-taught at Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, Nigeria, back in the middle 70s or thereabouts. So I do enjoy teaching. I enjoy teaching for multiple reasons. One of them is I get to learn something along the way. That's always exciting. And I want to just go on this journey with you. And let's see, who can lower the lights? Yes, even more, please, more. Yeah, good. And actually, I don't know if we can get a little bit crisper focus here, that would be great, if that's possible, up in the control booth. So it was just alluded to that I did live for a while in a foreign land, and this is an aerial photograph of Marrakesh, Morocco. I lived in that little house right there, that little courtyard house. And the experience of joining the Peace Corps and working there was as much about me learning about another culture, and not only another culture, but how other cultures respond to their environment, and therefore how do they build. And this was an exciting experience. And here is the Place General Pinat, the main plaza. I should go back one. That's this plaza that you see right in here. Only at night it looks like that, and it's an ever-changing hub of activity, extremely exciting, and it became, if you will, the front porch of the entire neighborhood, or the entire city, really. And I became fascinated with how light and shadow would strike inanimate objects and yet become alive by the movement and the pattern of the sun. This is sunlight dappling through the souks. And then after 2 years of working in Marrakesh, I took a long journey for about a year across the Sahara into many of the countries in West Africa. And my interest in architecture without architects became even more reinforced. And here you see, I think, a marvelous example of architecture just growing up out of the earth, organic architecture, as Frank Lloyd Wright might say. And these people are not importing tiles from Italy or air conditioners from Switzerland. This is living in harmony and in delicate balance with the environment. And this is an extreme example of architecture, if you will. This is for the nomadic Tuareg tribe in the Sahara, and they have these semi-permanent structures built out of reeds, and then they come to their encampments maybe 3 months a year, and then they wrap beautiful mats around them, and that creates the structure and the shade that's so necessary in that environment. And then here you see life along the Niger River. The Niger River is the river that flows from, the Niger River flows from all the way from the country of Niger up north to Timbuktu, and then the source of the river is the delta around Djenné and Mopti. And again, here you see just life and culture in delicate balance with the environment. And this is a completely different example of architecture responding to its environment. This is along the Gold Coast in Ghana. And here you see suddenly we're in the rainforest, and instead of thick mud walls and courtyards, it has now given way to a large roof made out of palm fronds. And it's all about cross ventilation, and the society responds with a very open, activities are expressed and exposed to the street, as you can see here. So one of the, there are several points that I want to make about this philosophy that we've developed called multicultural modernism, and I'm trying to show you the roots and the evolution of that philosophy. One of them is celebrating people and place. Well, this is Thorn Crown Chapel by Faye Jones. It's in Arkansas, fairly close to Fayetteville. I spoke last night in Fayetteville at the School of Architecture, but the day before had the extra treat of getting to see this chapel as well as the Mildred Cooper Chapel that Faye Jones did, also not so far from this chapel. And these are incredibly beautiful expressions that not only are they tectonically honest and delicate and forceful and powerful, but they harmonize into the landscape, they grow up out of the ground, they have a sense of place. And at the same time, there's even a sense of allusion to history. This is kind of a reverse concept of a Gothic arch. Instead of the flying buttress, all of the supports come from within. So I think that this creating poetry, but within a context and for the people that it's for, is a very important topic. So I want to show you a series of projects that I think support that idea. So this is a project that we did, and let me try to explain it. It's in Santa Monica. There you see the ocean. This is actually an original Richard Neutra house built in 1938. And our client bought a vacant piece of land right here, and we built this whole wing to protect the house from this very noisy street, as well as create a courtyard, which we call the entertainment courtyard. You'll see more in a minute. So here's the Lewin residence. It was designed and built right around 1938, and you can see the vacant piece of land right here. And these are just some of the original sketches and ideas, and I know that that KSU is very involved and interested in students learning to use sketchbooks. Of course, computers are incredibly important, but don't lose sight of that as students and as future architects. I think when your mind and your hand work together on paper, there's an impreciseness and a way of thinking and developing designs that could be very exciting. And here you see some of the materials. We did cast-in-place concrete, stainless steel. One of the interesting things about Richard Neutra is that he used to design houses that looked as if they were built in steel, but in fact they were built out of wood. So because we had a bigger budget probably than when he started, we were able to do the pavilion in mostly steel with some concrete. We restored the house. So this is an interesting conversation about preservation as well. It's a form of preservation, but it's really also an adaptive reuse to make the preservation work today for these clients. But you have to also appreciate that had they not bought the lot and expanded their house, there would have been a very large two or three-story McMansion that would have really overwhelmed the original house. So we think it's a form of preservation. You can also see that we wanted to honor the spirit of Neutra, but yet proclaim our own individuality and creativity 60 years later. Here's a semicircle. This is a cycloidal arch. So we are responding in section, not unlike what we found in the Neutra house and plan. However, this cycloidal arch is the same arch that Louis Kahn used on the Kimball Art Museum. It's an ancient Roman formula, and it's a flattened arch. And you can see we more or less just kissed the original house with a glass corridor connecting the two, and that was another way of honoring the house, if you will. And looking back towards the water, you see a wall, but with the push of a button, the wall slides away, and you get a good glimpse of the Pacific Century, what I like to call the Pacific Century. Yeah, anyone in the back should come on in. There are seats. Please come in. Another house, and we were meeting with students. Genevieve and myself were discussing with 14 students today, who I look forward to getting to know better, much better than just today. But talking about that, we do a diverse group of projects, and we started off over 30 years ago doing houses, and we still feel houses are an important design problem. And here is a house in Laguna, and these are our clients with their dog Tammy, and when they bought the house, the piece of land, it was a little tear-down house. They didn't realize that there was an 11-foot height limit on this piece of property, and that is from floor to top of roof. And they seemed very disappointed when we told them that. And we said, no, that's okay, it's just a constraint, we have to work with it. So we celebrated the horizontal line, we celebrated the views. This is a sloping site that goes all the way down to the ocean, which you see here. And just to give you a sense of it, this is our property, but the hill slopes gently down all the way to the ocean. And one of the ways that we unlocked the potential of the site is that you're able to drive down a ramp, and underneath the main floor are garage, gymnasium, storage, mechanical rooms, sauna, different secondary support. And that freed up the entire ground plane for the house. So mind you, again, 11-foot height limit, and very much interested in how do we evaporate the barrier between indoors and out, which is part and parcel to the possibilities of living in Southern California. So if you look here, there's no glass. This is completely open. That's, I'm trying to remember how wide that is. It's about 60 feet. And we have a series of doors that pocket into pockets in the wall, and it opens up completely. So the house can transform itself from a cozy house on a cold night to an open-air pavilion. on a beautiful day, of which there are many. There are also, we're doing some interesting things with materials. This happens to be rising, which is a naturally weathering steel, or not, it has zinc in it, so it's not pure steel. Here you see looking in the opposite direction, celebrating the horizontal line, almost as if capturing inspiration from a Japanese landscape. And this is a courtyard that is on the east side of the main living space, the ocean beyond. And because there are coastal breezes, we can actually be outside and block wind with doors that can open and close when one desires to do that. And some of the details in the kitchen, it's a very minimal palette, very clean detailing, and trying to celebrate the site and the simplicity of the purity and the beauty of the place. And we designed a little modernist house for Lonnie the turtle here. Lonnie gets a modern house too. So, changing in scale, but very much still responding to people and place, is this project here. And this took place maybe 10, 12 years ago. We were invited to a design competition for a biotech research laboratory right near MIT. Here's MIT, the Longfellow Bridge, Boston, and this is an emerging biotech research zone. And it was interesting that we were even invited because we had not done a project this large. We had never done a laboratory building, nor had we done anything on the East Coast. But for some reason we were invited and we prevailed over some serious competition, and it was a great new project type for us. So we designed this building, which is 6 stories tall. It's privatized research, but we saved all the corners, all the 4 corners for retail. So we're very conscious of energizing the ground plane, even though it's privatized research inside. At the plaza level, at the street, it's energizing. We also brought in, at that time, materials from Europe that had never been used in a curtain wall at that time. Channel glass and terracotta rain screen. The channel glass was, in fact, for sure the first time it was used in a curtain wall in the US. Here you see that generating of activity along the ground plane. And you see the dance between weightlessness and weight, contrasting the 2 principal materials. We wanted to express the front entrance, which you see here with this rather large symbolic canopy, and we needed to stabilize the outer rigor, so we used technologies of a double-tapered mast that came from shipbuilders in Boston. So we're always interested in understanding how can the culture of what's happening within a building perhaps express itself on the exterior skin. So here is, we did our own little study of DNA and found out that there are 4 sequencing gels that compose a DNA molecule. So we took 4 different textures of the same clay, colored terracotta, and composed our own DNA. So it's a little bit of an inside story that not everybody knows, but the scientists are aware of it, and it is part and parcel to how this skin design developed. This, by the way, is our test. We had in our specs that there had to be a full test. We hired the company Heitman, they're a curtain wall consultant, and they have a testing facility outside of St. Louis, not that far from here, actually. And so what was happening was that this is they create wind with a DC-3, and actually the glass kept leaking. So we had to fly to Boston to meet our very irate client because it was a fast-track project and the project was being built at the same time that the channel glass was failing its water test. Anyway, to make a long story short, we were read the Riot Act. We brought in the German engineers over, and they were able to resolve it. It was just a subcontractor installation issue. But sometimes you just cannot be smart enough to have some of those tests done before the fact that all the glass had been up. That would have been a disaster. So anyway, and here you see the panelized terracotta system being installed. These are all prefab panels that go up, these are made in the shop and then hoisted up. And here you see it in process, and then we infill the extra terracotta pieces. Inside, this is a fairly large footprint. So we wanted to bring light through the center of the core of this building, this light-filled skylight. You can see the skylight there, atrium. And one of the things that we were very interested in is trying to connect people vertically as well as horizontally. So you have to realize there are different researchers doing different kinds of things in their laboratories. So by these large extended platforms, we created what I like to call living rooms in the sky, and that was a way of, and we would always put the living rooms in the sky right next to the coffee bar, just within the shell of the atrium. And so these places become places of gathering and connectivity, and some of the platforms have foosball machines, flexible furniture, so they're quite effective. This is the Bayou Residence. This was a house that we designed in Houston, Texas. Unfortunately, it never went to completion because our clients got divorced, so that was sad. That does happen. Sometimes not everything gets built. But they were art collectors, and they had a significant collection of Donald Judd. I don't know if you know that artist. He's a fantastic artist who had very cubic, beautiful, pure sculptural elements. So that in turn influenced the design of this house. These 5 cubes were going to be clad in Texas limestone. And we made a trip to Marfa, Texas, where Donald Judd has an amazing, called the Chinati Foundation, an amazing place where you can start to see some of his large scale pieces, which greatly influenced the design of this house. And you can start to see some of the original sketches that emanated and started the design process off. And I might add that this site cascades downhill to the bayou. You get a sense of it. The bayou would probably be right about there, the water of the bayou. But alas, it never happened. Another part or philosophical construct for multicultural modernism is create community. In my opinion, architecture is for people. It's not about, it's not a self-conscious artistic pursuit by itself. It's a collaborative pursuit, and it must serve the culture and the people who it serves. And so this is a marvelous environment of Varanasi along the Ganges River in India. So creating community can come in many different scales. And I want to talk about this modest little project. So this was a renovation of a Rudolf Schindler house, a 980 square foot house that was right next to another Rudolf Schindler house. And it's an interesting story because we were friends with the 2 people who lived in this house, the couple that lived there. And my wife and I went over there for dinner, and our friend said, oh, by the way, this house, which was completely boarded up and derelict for years, they said, oh, it's going on sale for probate tomorrow. And we bought it. We bought the house because we were afraid that some developers would have just knocked it down, because the price that we paid for it was really the price of the land. But I knew what we had there. It was a Rudolf Schindler house, who is incredibly important architect, and I hope that the students that come to LA will get to see if not this house, we'll get to see the original Schindler house on Kings Road. But anyway, getting back to the main point. So one of the things that we did was we actually created a communal garden and a communal gathering place for the entire street. I might also add that, okay, so here you see it. This is Callie and Rich's house, and my daughter and son-in-law bought this house from me, and so this is the house that we renovated, and here you get a sense of that communal yard. We built a communal fence area for recycling and just some of the programmatic service items that were necessary to pull off. And this was our communal endeavor of going at it, and we did it as a communal garden project, in fact. And here you see the rescue mission that we undertook. This was the original photo. I mean, the place was literally falling down, and this is what we were able to restore it to. But one of the really good news things about it was that we were able to, all the original windows and doors were there. The kitchen was a disaster. The bathroom was a disaster. So we decided that since it was for a young family to raise their kid, we felt that we should be open to adaptively reusing it, but not changing any of the pure spatial constructs. Here you could see this set of steps. This is, of course, before we could tell with forensic discovery that there was a desk there, and we were able to recreate the original desk from piecing it together. And here you see we opened, actually, the kitchen. You can see that's double the width of this. We opened up the kitchen to reflect a more contemporary lifestyle. And here you see how closed off the kitchen once was and how it was then opened up. So this very modest house, like I say, 980 square feet, but it also made me fall in love with Rudolf Schindler all over again, who in 1922 designed his own house on Kings Road, and because I worked on this project quite intently or intensely, and read several books about Schindler, I believe that his 1922 Kings Road house was the big bang of modern architecture, and I'm happy to argue that with anyone if they'd like to. And here you see, looking back, there was an old 80-year-old grapevine just lying on the ground, and we created this structure that was influenced by the sleeping porches of the Kings Road house. So creating community also can take on a grander scale. This is the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. It's part of ASU. It's in downtown Phoenix. It's right near the new light rail. Here you see the light rail coming by. And this gives you a sense of the site. This is the entire downtown campus for ASU. This campus has now been in place maybe 8 years or so, and it's really rejuvenating the city. It's great to have students in what was formerly a kind of a not fully utilized part of the neighborhood. But notice again, retail on the ground level, lots of activity. We have TV stations up here. Channel 8, the public TV station, is also housed in this building. So this building has not only a school of journalism, but it also has certain components that are for public television and radio. We also delivered this project in the design-build methodology, and we were able to actually deliver the project in 22 months from the beginning of programming to occupancy, and that's about as long as it takes to do a bathroom remodel in LA. So we're very proud of the fact that it was done with that timeline. It was also done actually on a very tight budget through the design-build methodology. We wanted to clad this element in Core 10, and it wasn't in the budget, so we were able to choose 3 colors of painted steel, the colors coming from the local mountains, and the patterning influenced by the TV and radio spectrum. And here, this is right at the north edge of downtown. This is the north facade. You get a sense of just the composition of that. Now, mind you, these are TV studios that don't want light, so that's why it's quite a large box. We also built this structure in post-tension concrete slabs up to the floor, and then we went to lightweight steel because all of the columns are on about 30th grid. But the TV studios needed huge spans, 60 by 90. So we just went to a much lighter weight system for that large span, and the way we were able to service the TV studios was through a large freight elevator, capable of actually, the spec on the elevator was that it had to be able to fit a beetle, a VW bug. This stair, let me go back for 1 second. This is the principal stairway going up and down, public stair. And we worked with an artist, Paul Deeb from Baltimore, and we made an environmental, we collaborated on an environmental light piece. We have a double skin of glass. We have air coming up through the double skin, ventilated from the top, and there are shards of aluminum hanging down on monofilament. The hot air moves these pieces of aluminum, and there's this ever-changing lightscape of refracted light, and it's quite a beautiful piece. And you can see it works both at night or in the day. And this is the lobby. We did some, I like to say sometimes we'll discover twofers, two things for the price of one. This is the structural concrete slab that we then ground down, and we're able to have it feel like terrazzo. And this is the heart of the building on the second floor, rising up 3 levels, and it's the forum where this is the community on the scale of the school, of the community of the School of Journalism. And this is all movable furniture, and it's an ever-changing peoplescape of activity. And here you get a sense of the TV studios, and way up through this light bar are the steel trusses and insulation that form the roof. We're doing a project that we're just starting. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a sense of it, but we are trying to not only create community, we're trying to become part of the fabric of a community. This is Sunset Boulevard. Sunset Boulevard is, in Los Angeles, is filled with signs and activities, and there are many hotels and music venues and all of that. So we have gotten the opportunity to design we're now working on a hotel and condominium project. This is the hotel. And you're allowed to do digital signage on this strip of Sunset. So this is all a digital sign that also will be, even though the rendering doesn't quite show it, the edge of this banding, this fluid banding, will also be LED lighting and part of the whole signage. And so in a way, we're trying to become part of this very vibrant community. And here the hotel, there's, on the scale of the community of the hotel audience, is a communal roof terrace. And there will be 40 condominiums in this building, and it's a shared plaza or courtyard that will be a very important hangout place, and we're going to have cafe activity that spills out onto the piazza. And you get a sense of how we're trying to create these communal outdoor terraces. We've also part of, and this was a city requirement, we talked about this in class today, how because the city requires it, and I think it's a great requirement, that we have to build a certain number of affordable units as well. So courtyards for living, another topic that is one of the components of multicultural modernism. I go back to Marrakesh. The courtyard on the scale of this city is the Place Jemal Fennel. And each of these private courtyards are only 2 stories tall. So here you see the American dream turned into a nightmare, right? The density of LA is increasing, land is more and more expensive, and everybody still has the dream of plopping down their house in the middle of their piece of land. Well, it just, we're learning now as LA is densifying and as mass transit is coming in, we're realizing that this paradigm just doesn't work. Every piece of public space is asphalt. You look out your window 5 feet away is your neighbor. And then take a look at Marrakesh, Morocco. So why not reverse the field, right? Why stick to these old paradigms of thinking? And let's take suburbia and look at it as a way of creating density with courtyards. Another influence that reinforced this idea was that I did spend some time in Japan doing a project in the late 80s, and I noticed that many of their ryokans and important buildings would have courtyards, and also how even within the enclosure, there would be almost like a special meditation spot to a Tokonoma Tansu area. So creating community is important in the work we're doing, and this is the School of Earth and Space Exploration on the main Tempe campus at Arizona State University. One of the things also I'm a firm believer in is listening to the land. Well, what does that mean? Well, every sun exposure is different. Western sun is completely different than northern sun. So this is our north facade. Notice that it's mostly glass. This is our western facade. And we have a double skin protecting the glass. I'm a big believer in clarity. These channel glass vertical elements are stairs. The the shear walls that actually give it the lateral stability are all expressed in concrete. It's a very simple diagram. There's an L-shaped partie of laboratories. In each corner are large shafts and vertical circulation. There's the core of the building, elevators, restrooms, etc. The mixing bowl, where we really create community, you'll see it in a moment. And then these are offices bringing in north and west light. And there's lots of glass bringing in light from edges all the way through. Actually, it was interesting. We really tried to convince them that this should be completely open. And it was a losing battle. They just said, no, that's not how scientists want to operate. They want to be in cubby holes. So we were able to still bring in the light. This is looking from a laboratory component back from that angle. And so we clad all the vertical shafts in brick, including the penthouse, so the clarity of that. Here you see the shear wall. We did match the same color of brick, but we actually pulled the brick out and created some very interesting patterning that was more consistent with some of the design ideas we had. Notice the sunscreen on the west. Here's the north facade. You start to see that clarity of the diagram, shear wall, vertical circulation. That's the entrance, by the way. And again, the western facade, that brick element at the base is the planetarium. You'll see more about that in a moment. And you walk by the planetarium to enter into the building, and then you're in the main lobby of the building, which the first 2 floors of this structure are actually public, and it's an educational outreach to students of all ages, even including K through 12. The planetarium, which is behind this wall, is this structure here. And it's very interesting, the technology, because you put on 3D glasses and it's as if you're in a domed auditorium. The technology is marvelous. So here's the cross-section that is significant for you to just appreciate. The first 2 floors being the public component, and then at the 3rd floor, notice there's a floor over this atrium, and then there's a 5-story skylit atrium, and from this floor up is all privatized research. By the way, this building pays for itself. The university, through its researchers, is able to get large grants from various governmental agencies. So there might be on one floor a complete research project going on for NASA. On another floor, you might find a big research grant from Homeland Security. So there's a lot going on. They're studying, they have a live feed to the Mars rover. So there's a lot of Earth and space exploration going on. And so here we see the 3rd floor rising up. You see the elevator bank on the far wall. When you look down, this is our crater carpet. We asked the 5 top scientists to give us a photo of their favorite crater, and we made our crater carpet with their craters and composed this composition, which just becomes fun and people enjoy it. But importantly, we're taking all the labs and we're opening them up. So the brick, remember the brick that wraps the laboratory component, the L-shaped partie? Well, that wrap continues on the inside of the atrium. This becomes the main gathering place, creating community at the scale of this building and the research that's going on, and then paying special attention to allow the indoor activity of the lab to extend out into the atrium. And then just some of the details, laser cut stainless steel. This patterning was taken from the United States geological patterns that exist, that are all published and capable of being taken and used. Here's a house that expresses courtyards. This house has been pulled apart. There's a courtyard in the middle. And here you see the courtyard from a distance. And that courtyard also has extension of indoor and outdoor space. This is now looking back at the guest house. This happens to be not in a very dense area, but we are doing some houses in Venice on tight sites embracing the courtyard concept. You'll see that at the very end. The rooftop, and we're generating activity up here by supporting it with a fireplace and an outdoor kitchen. This is a house that is still under construction in Marin County in the town of Ross. And this is a rendering, as you can see, but there's a series of outdoor courtyards that are defined that you will get to see. And you can see that more in plan. That, and in a sense, this is a defined courtyard, but with a beautiful view, which you'll see in a minute. Resonating to the place is important. So we actually used terracotta. This is terracotta clay, baked clay, big panels 5 feet wide. But notice the resonance with the redwood tree bark. So it's a beautiful resonance of color and materiality. Again, it's still under construction. We're doing some detailing where this is the facade. Look at the infinity edge on all. So there's a tube of water, all 4 sides. And a house that we're just beginning now, well, more than just beginning, we're going to start construction probably in a couple of months. And it's, at first I thought, oh, gee, this drawing it's really hard to read, but in a way, that might be good because it really kind of shows how indoor space fuses with outdoor space, which is part of the design. So this is enclosed space, courtyard. So it's really a series of interlocking courtyards, and the negative space is important as the positive space, meaning the defined outdoor rooms are just as important as the indoor rooms. We're going to use this house is a lot about materiality and craft. We're going to use these beautiful handmade and fired brick. And we're going to bring the brick on the inside in certain areas. And a very minimalist palette. These are just some sketches for the master bathroom. Excuse me. Indigenous architecture informs a sustainable future. And again, I go back to a photograph in West Africa where they're not importing anything. They are building with the materials that are found right from the site. This is an aerial view of Pomona College, and Pomona College is about 50 miles east of Los Angeles. It's a venerable old institution with classical Mediterranean architecture. You can see all the tile roofs of the original campus. So we were asked to design 2 buildings for student housing, this complex and this complex, but notice how, from an aerial point of view, it looks completely different than the red tile roofs. And it was an interesting conversation because the board of trustees of the school were more conservative and really felt the architecture should be traditional and look like that, and yet the students were developing a green agenda. Students are ahead of the curve, right? So there was a green agenda being developed in part by a lot of student participation, and we were kind of right on the cusp of, we were caught in the middle, if you will. So we had to make 3 presentations to the Board of Trustees, and in the end, we're able to convince them that this building was more about the future rather than the past, and we are now harvesting a great deal of energy for solar, hot water, and electricity for this project. However, we did want to still resonate and be respectful of the original architecture. We took terracotta from rain for sunscreen, and there was that tie-in. We used precast concrete, insulated precast concrete panels for our walls that helped with our thermal mass. And I didn't mention earlier that it's built over a parking structure, including the field is over the parking. Now, one part of the dorms are only 2 stories. This is 3 stories. So notice how we are doing, well, let me just use the next photograph. So we actually created a new classroom for the college for sustainability, and they added that as a new curriculum topic for the school based on this, and that's been really exciting. So we added a chalkboard. There are metrics. Students can plug their computers in and watch electricity being generated. And again, you see the dialogue of the old and the new. And we were very careful to. There were six bedrooms to a communal suite. And this is one of the bedrooms. All had operable windows, ventilation fans. And even though this is in a very hot climate, because it's just it's about 50 miles east of the ocean, we were able to, if that group of 6 students, if the air conditioning is on and one of them opens a window, it automatically shuts down. But what's really cool is that the students because they can all see how much each suite of 6 students is consuming for energy. So they compare notes and they try to be the most sustainable group of 6 that they can be, and it's kind of great. This project this is at the University of California in Irvine, the Contemporary Arts Center, and this project was won in a design-build competition, and it also is an interesting study in sustainability, and let me try to explain. So there are 2 large spaces, a gallery, 2-story gallery, 2-story experimental theater. And these spaces are highly air-conditioned, lots of lighting demand, people, etc. But all of the perimeter spaces surrounding these 2 large volumes in the core of the building. By the way, I probably should have had this slide a little earlier, but this is just showing you how this had fit very tightly into the existing arts campus. So our strategy was that all of the perimeter spaces would be naturally ventilated. And in order to do that, we had to look at each facade quite differently. Here's the western facade, obviously the most complicated and challenging from a solar point of view. So we have these metal fins blocking the sun from the west. We create a corridor, and then these spaces have windows that can open. So then you might ask, well, how does that work? Well, we have a series of ducts that allow the breeze to come in and be ventilated through the roof. So every room does have natural ventilation that is surrounding the perimeter of these 2 large volumes. And we specifically did not put in air conditioning in all the perimeter spaces, and did a little bit of education along the way where faculty and students are made aware that on certain really hot days, they will, in fact, not have a 72-degree room, they'll have probably a 76-degree room, but it doesn't happen that often, and we're taking advantage of the coastal breezes. We used old telephone poles stained orange for our telephone pole courtyard, if you will, a great gathering place. And another example of sensible sustainability, if you will, This was another design-build competition for the GSA, the General Services Administration. It's a United States federal courthouse in Yuma, Arizona. And this canopy was a great offering to the community. And it's because it's very close to downtown. You go over this set of bridges, and there's a wonderful series of walls and benches that people can sit on, and it has become a great gathering place. And people sit there because they're protected from the sun, and this canopy produces, these are photovoltaic panels producing 21% of the building's electricity. There are a lot of security demands of a building type like this, too much to go into, other than to say that we have to actually protect the building from car bombs or truck bombs. So all of these walls, which just look like friendly landscape walls, are in fact also part of the security. So we really spent a lot of time and energy trying to integrate those very demanding, basically programmed requirements. In fact, this entire structure, since it's closer to the street than 50 feet, that canopy actually just sits and is not attached to the building. So that if, God forbid, there was a catastrophic event, that canopy can fall away by itself and not affect the building. It's sited very close to the downtown center, right next to the Colorado River. This is a very historic bridge built in the late 1800s, the ocean-to-ocean bridge. So we're always trying to we always do a series of research to more fully understand the context of the culture of the place. And we're very interested in, of course, the culture of what does the building want to be. So we looked at the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., and how that heroic, very important historic building influenced our modest little structure, which is now a reinterpretation of a classic courthouse, but using materials of the native Arizona desert, the sandstone, and rusted steel. The east and west facades we have this mesh, this rusted steel mesh, and we're growing grapevines up it. This photo was taken about a year ago. The vines have grown almost all the way to the top. So that was our very, very modest way of protecting the windows on the east and the west from this very intensive sun. And from our historical research, we did look at veranda and porches and looked at how do you modulate the sun in an intense desert environment. We also, influenced by the bridges, created our own bridge and our own little arroyo. And here you see that shaded area in action, and people do hang out. Inside is a two-story lobby. The courtrooms themselves there are two courtrooms on the top floor, and there's a lot of program. There's marshal's offices, and there's actually a jail inside this building, really. I mean, it's a very complicated program, too complicated to get into, but it was a big effort to resolve all the issues in a very simple, clear way and make it be able to be built on budget. And one of the things that we did do is we brought in beautiful north light into the courtroom, which humanized the whole environment. And the last topic, part and parcel to multicultural modernism, is think global and be local. So I was driving along in southern Nigeria when I was living there years ago, and I saw this kind of amazing house. I stopped, and then out pops this guy dressed like his house. So I got really excited and started to chat with him, and he told me the story that he worked for an Italian contractor in Brazil for many years and then came home to build his dream house. So he brought all of these inputs together, and he built his Brazilian fanciful facade element and his Italian balustrade and his Nigerian laterite exuberant stone detailing, and voila, here you have his own multicultural concoction in architecture. So here's another example where along the shores of Lake Tanganyika, in this little fishing village, they just skipped the Industrial Revolution and went right directly to the 21st century. So going back now a long ways, going back to when I was living and teaching in Nigeria, I had the opportunity to design a very small experimental theater. And I do want to say one thing, that every project that I've shown was, so far, and even after this, were truly the work of collaboration of various people in our studio. Architecture is a very collaborative art. This is the only project that basically I did as a single person, and this was before I really opened up our practice in Southern California. So anyway, this was an experiment. It was definitely built out of the local materials. Here they are building sun-dried bricks that form the walls that built from this plan. It's kind of an indoor-outdoor experimental theater. You'll see that in a moment. And one of the things that was quite interesting was that this campus was built out of steel, glass, and concrete, and really did have many issues with heat and just issues like that. And we built this rather subversive and very inexpensive structure about just 300 yards from campus. But notice how the arrangement of audience to performer can change. All the furniture is flexible. So it's really the students who took over and in fact defined the space. And this was the first time that I became interested in integrating art into architecture. So as I had a love of these crude industrial sheds in Africa, I found a kindred spirit in Los Angeles, an African art dealer who wanted us to design his house. So he also had a similar love of those industrial African sheds, and this is now his house, his family's house, all built out of corrugated Corten steel, nestled into basically an infill lot in Los Angeles. And every surface, roof, wall, skin is very inexpensive corrugated Corten steel. Glass doors open up, and you can see his art collection. And here they are. This is Ernie and Diane. And Ernie always wears camouflage, and Diane always wears some form of fake animal print. And I think that proves it. Here you see the hunter and the hunted. And we've had the opportunity to do work overseas where we have to respond to a culture. So we had the opportunity a while ago, over 10 years ago, we were commissioned. This, by the way, is the Burj Khalifa by SOM, the tallest building in the world as of the moment. And our client wanted us to do a rather large house in Dubai. And I really do believe that that one needs to be not only local but global simultaneously, and there is a dance between those two territories. So literally the Bedouin tradition still exists in the outskirts of the city. The crescent moon is an important symbol. So you start to see the embryo of the idea for the house. And in the desert, we dug deep wells and created our own oases. This roof is an aluminum-clad concrete structure held up on 14 stone-clad concrete columns. Also hearkening back to perhaps some of the heroic early modern architecture of Le Corbusier, Oscar Niemeyer perhaps. And in plan, there's a very complex series of arrangements, but in plan, you can see also the crescent in plan, and this is basically a veil of steel, or actually steel and aluminum, you'll see it in a moment, that separates private to public, because this is a very important individual who has large receptions etc. And here you see that veil. That veil in Arabic is called the musharabia. It's a sunscreen on the south facade. Now, I'd like to tell you that this sunscreen does block the southern sun, and it does, and that large roof does create a large swath of shade. But from a pure sustainable point of view, there is no way to justify this house. But was I going to turn down the commission? No, I wasn't. Taking water from outdoors to indoors, creating an evaporative cooling. Let me just go back. I want to point out one detail for the students. Notice these columns. Notice how they do not touch the ceiling. These columns are cantilevered out of their foundation in the ground, and they hold up the musharabia, or the sunscreen. And that is to have the clarity of this large roof that is supported only on the stone columns. So there's a clear diagram, and that the power of the floating roof is not diluted by these columns had they touched. Now, I just went to Crystal Bridges, and I don't know if any of you have been there, but if and when you go there, there's this very elaborate, these quite beautiful glulam beams, curved glulam beams held up on a suspension cable, and yet the architect chose to have these very big, fat diagonals holding up the glass, and it dilutes the clarity of the structural diagram. So again, that large roof is all in cantilever off of these columns. So because of that house, and because it was for an important individual in the Emirates, we were invited to be one of 14 architects invited to an international competition. And it was for their parliament building in Abu Dhabi. So I felt it was important to actually do a study of a very important, culturally important architecture in the Middle East. This is in Istanbul, the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. And one of the important criteria for the brief was that they wanted a contemporary building, but they wanted it rooted to their traditions. And that could be very, how do you interpret that? It could be interpreted in many ways. And this is how we interpreted it. We decided that a dome was important, but this dome is actually a sunshade device. So it's shading all of the important spaces in the House of Parliament, and all the parliamentary members and all the support spaces are on flanking on east and west. Notice that the east and west walls are very blank because there's also an intense sun. This is us presenting. On the jury was Sir Richard Rogers, important members of the House of Parliament. This was our local architect who was going to carry out our vision to execute it. And but importantly, we were really looking at culture and tradition and trying to reinterpret. So we looked at the national five-pointed flower, rotated it, and it became the starting point for our dome. And the flanking buildings were more rooted in the vernacular and the colors of the earth and the local sandstones. So here you get a sense of that grandeur, and the dome completely reinterpreted as now a shade structure. But there's another thing. This culture is also very interested in carved pattern and decoration, and we looked at the casting of light and shade and shadow. So here you have pattern, all these patterns that are now not carved in stone, but ever so slowly moving across the face of the white marble. So it's a reinterpretation, and we actually were invited to be in the final four, and I'm happy to say we prevailed. We were selected even over two other Pritzker Prize, we're not, but two Pritzker Prize winning firms, and that was a real thrill. It's been 3 years since we won, and the country seems to be on hold about building this building. I think they're busy buying military aircraft rather than houses of parliament. But it still could happen, and we are told that it will. Just some of the areas of assembly, the main chamber, the House of Parliament itself. And even we explored electrical light fixtures details, and you can look at, these are 5-pointed pentagons rotated and kind of exploring just patterning and light. Okay, the last project. So I always wanted to build a solar home, and this is my 7th grade science fair project. And actually, I got to build a solar home in the town of Venice, California. This is the throbbing boardwalk in Venice on a summer day. We live about maybe a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from this throbbing. Thank God we're far enough away because this is too busy for me. But it's part of it. It's a real walking community. I think some people have this notion that Los Angeles is only a car city connected by people in little capsules of metal known as cars. But quite frankly, there's a great emphasis now on walking communities that are being developed. We have a light rail system that is getting enhanced all the time, and it's quite a vibrant city in many, many ways. But this is my and our family's solar home. This is the main house. We did tear down a very little bungalow that was there, and so it's an urban infill. This is our guest house floating over a garage. The 2 trees, actually 3 beautiful trees, a palm tree and 2 Aleppo pines were here first, so we built the house around the trees. And this was the beginning of the design. The design was an exploration of negative and positive space. So all these site plans, the rectangle representing, by the way, the site is 43 feet wide, 132 feet long, 5,700 square feet of dirt. And again, that exploration of negative and positive and interesting courtyards. You can see that this is kind of a summary of what I've been talking about. Here it sits on a corner, we did not want to drive far away. We wanted to be part of a walking and bicycle community, which this is. And here's the house, and you can see that the tree was here first, so we built the house around the tree. And all of the exterior materials are naturally weathering. There are no coatings. This is Corten steel. This is Trex, which is basically recycled sawdust and plastic. Concrete block, and you'll see more about this exoskeleton in a second for what it does. It's important to note, no air conditioning. I refuse to put air conditioning in it. It's all based on natural ventilation. So the doors can open completely. This is a 16-foot aperture. Notice that there's no glass. The glass has slid into a pocket in the wall. You can take a running leap from the living room. You can jump right off that couch and jump in the pool if you want. And a simple diagram. Two things I want to point out. We do generate some of our own electricity with photovoltaics, but we have a very interesting shade structure that helps create our microenvironment. So on automatic buttons, we can control up and down. You can see influence from my days spent in Marrakesh in terms of color. And there's an extra magical thing. I talked to the students a little bit today about how not only does architecture need to resolve the pragmatic, respond to the site, respond to the people, but how about poetry and magic? These are all good things to have as part of architecture as well. So I discovered that not only do I get to block that intense western sun with these shades, but I get to play tent and camper because I can control my own space. So my house is a transformer that I get to play with on the weekend, and I have a lot of fun with it. Here you see that from the street. The house is a compound. This is a 6-foot wall surrounding the house, so it creates a series of privatized courtyards. Here you get a sense of those courtyards as you walk into the house. Mind you, 5,700 square feet of land. Pivot doors that open up. This is the family court. And the living room that opens up to this large tree that you saw earlier. Again, a 16-foot aperture where when you need glass, it's there, but when you don't want it, you can or slide the doors minimally into this pocket, and you have a lanai, if you will. The concrete floor, we do need heat. It gets down into the 40s. You do need heat, so we have embedded in the floor radiant hot water, and that floor was pigmented with iron oxide when the day of the cement pour. Looking back into the family court, you can see how the kitchen connects strongly to the dining area, which in turn connects strongly to the back house, the guest house above. Again, I guess we do get away with a bit of murder in our detailing. This is our threshold. And one of the things that I am also interested in is this idea of counterpointing the primal and the technical. So here you see this very crude, very rusticated, shot, bead blasted concrete block with a strike joint, a very crude strike joint, and it's counterpointed against this very technical bridge. This bridge is glass, and the bridge is held up by steel cables that are from the sailboat industry. So you have to believe in technology. Here's my family, and we believe in technology, so there we are sitting there. And this is our architectural family. We work out of a large repurposed dance hall that was built in 1917 in Culver City. We're about 35 of us. And again, I want to reiterate, it's a very collaborative environment. We have interns, and there are 4 partners and 3 associates, and it's a vibrant culture, and it's a great place to work. So again, just to summarize, the tenets of multicultural modernism: celebrating people and place, creating community. Let's not forget who our buildings are for. Courtyards as perhaps a new way of looking at density and community. Indigenous architecture can inform a sustainable future. Sure, it's our job and it's your job as students to take architecture to a place that we can't even imagine. So embrace all the new technologies, they're important, but sustainable architecture is not about just pasting something onto a building. Understand the fundamentals as well. And think global and be local. And this is an image of our studio. And again, thank you for listening to me share with you the evolution of multicultural modernism. And I'm very happy to be the Victor Regnier visiting chair, and I'm going to welcome Genevieve and her students to LA, and then I'll be back here in the spring. Thank you. If people want to ask questions, I'm here to answer them. I often find that shyness kind of sets in, but anybody? Yes.
All right. I found it kind of interesting, this sort of idea of this really modest and indigenous concept behind a lot of your designs. So I was wondering how that conversation happens with clients that are sometimes pretty eccentric, and convincing them that this really modest, indigenous, sustainable, really human-like concept can be part of their project.
You know, it's a good question. They're not separate things. It's a client. If you have a great idea and if you can sell it with passion or explain it with intelligence, they're probably going to agree or believe in it. But don't sell it with such passion that you're not going to be willing to listen if they want to respond. So it's always a dance, it's a dialogue. I mean, you don't really get good architecture without good clients. I mean, the client dialogue only makes it better. And that's often why actually the best, we don't do houses for developers, we do single family houses for clients because a developer wants it to be generic. But that's not to say we wouldn't do multifamily housing as in the hotel and the condos. That's obviously that's the work of the developer. So it's you have to be a good listener and you have to also be a passionate advocate for your ideas. Yes.
I have a question rooted in complete injury. Have you ever done a project where it snows?
You know,
You say no.
no, the answer is actually yes. It snows in Boston, right? Cambridge, Mass.
Oh,
So I got you there. but that doesn't mean we wouldn't want to tackle that challenge, and it does mean we have to be intelligent about the details we use and the systems and all of that. Absolutely.
I was being flippant, but last year we had Javier Sanchez, professor, and I was reminded one time when I was taking friends around, I was teaching in Mexico City, and one of my friends said, "This just isn't." Because of like you showed at your house, the ability to have that gasket or life gas.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because we were having a conversation with the students today, and one of the things we talked about, because they're really dealing with a big, broad, global issue, and basically one of the things we talk about is that life isn't fair. It's true. But in a big picture way, details in California, that's a minor picture. We were talking about issues of homelessness and
Sure.
lack of resources and global warming and big stuff. Yeah. Yes. Please.
I know that you stress community a lot.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I know that you stress community a lot.
Yes.
How much of the community do you actually bring in to talk with to actually make spaces work?
Okay, great question. More than you might imagine. First of all, when we're doing a building for a university, like the contract school or the School of Earth and Space Exploration, we have to make presentations to multiple segments of the academic community, to faculty, administration, and at times even to the student body. We have to make presentations to the student body. And you can't make everybody happy at the same time. It's impossible. But if you can make them at least a believer that what you're doing is correct, and maybe they don't get everything they want because there's divergent voices that you just can't make everybody happy. It's the way it is, especially with things like color. If somebody likes one color and another person doesn't, it's very subjective. In terms of our houses, quite frankly, we really have to make only our client happy. However, more and more, there are neighborhood groups who are starting to try to have a voice. And this can be actually, quite frankly, a problem because we're very happy to work within the constraints of the zoning code. Tell us the height limit, tell us the setbacks. We're not going to push any limits. We will be sensitive to scale. We'll do everything according to the rule book. But when you get a group of, I'm going to call them vigilantes, that say, oh, we like Mediterranean architecture. We like arches. We like red tile roofs. That does get me pissed off, I have to say. And so we have to fight for it. But that's what's happening. You get a lot of them over it. It's called NIMBYism, not in my backyard. NIMBY. I don't know if you haven't heard that word. Yeah. Someone's shaking his head like you dealt with in the locker room. Yes.
Yeah, I have another question. I've seen that you've done a lot of work on, like, you call it adaptive reuse, or if you're restoring part of an old design. But in some of your other designs, you've used this idea of like party and bringing that to concept. How can you apply those ideas of like party into an adaptive reuse project or something?
Right. So there's no single answer because but you know, let me just talk about adaptive reuse a little bit because we're starting to do more and more adaptive reuse, and we're doing it we're doing it for, what we're finding now is we're doing some office buildings in LA that we're taking old, huge bunkers of buildings that were actually built for the aerospace industry, and they've been empty for a few years. And now creative new developers realize that there's a whole new industry of creative office users. That might be the tech industry, or the creative design industry, or even in the movie business, post-production. So we're taking floor plates that are 200 foot square. I mean, these are huge bunkers of a building, and we're figuring out how do you bring in light, and how do you bust open walls, and how do you connect to the outdoors, to the courtyards. We're taking a lot of our residential ideas and bringing it to the workplace. So, and also we're finding in universities, a lot of universities are looking very seriously at adaptive reuse, and how do you repurpose a building, or how do you repurpose part of it and add onto it. I gave a talk last night at the University of Arkansas. Their new School of Architecture was absolutely beautiful, and it was partially repurposed and integrated with a new wing. Very, very well done. Yes?
I saw you had a lot of different mind backgrounds.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, when you go into the your proposals for your projects,
Yes.
do you start off with the details, or do you start off with the objective things first and then go into it?
Yeah, usually when you're at the beginning of a project, the details are often developed then. You're kind of telling about the big picture of the design. Probably not that different than your presentations to your faculty, right? The first presentation is going to be about maybe research you've done or big picture. And maybe 6 weeks later, you're starting to look at materials and details and systems, tectonics. So it's not that different. Just usually from the large scale to the smaller scale. But they all work together. They have to support each other. And I like to tell my students, if you have a strong idea, a guiding principle, those details should reinforce it. Go back to the big idea. Have a big idea, have a concept, have a party, and then don't stray so far away. So many of my students, even master's students, they have so many good ideas, and they want to put them all in one project, right? Well, you can't do that. If you put every color into a bucket, you get the color of the bucket. So you have to edit yourself. That's important. Yes.
In the thread of the architectural expression, just on a full scale or historical scale, how do you personally decide on modernism and the multicultural modernism that you described?
Okay, well, the multicultural modernism really evolved, as you can see, over a long period of living in another culture and being educated, really. That, there are other voices out there that I can learn from. And so that's what that was. And it's not like, I'm building mud huts in LA, right? No, I'm not. Why interested in modernism? Because